Hello, I'm Austin,
I'm Dan.
and this is our project about mythology in video games. When talking about mythology in games, first we need to define what mythos is. It refers to stories that, while not substantiated by, empirical evidence, for example, not really a documentary, they are still entertaining and they're still affecting. Now, video games, even if they aren't specifically referencing mythology like God of War does, or like Two Human does, still have their own internal mythologies and histories, depending on the amount of world building that was put into them. But for humans, for us, the people playing them, they have a similar effect to the mythology of Greek and Roman peoples had on them. You see various
myths that exist, like you're saying, Austin, like in Greek mythology relating to games in some ways, or?
Well, no,
Or
what
no?
I'm saying is they fulfill a similar function. And when we see a Greek tragedy,
Okay.
like about Oedipus Rex, who was very intelligent, and that led him to try to interpret the will of the gods, but that was an act of hubris on his part.
Mm-hmm.
It was arrogant, and the end result is that he screwed up horribly and ended up fulfilling the rather awful prophecy that he was trying to avoid, that of killing his father and marrying his mother. And it ended up really, really ruining his family.
Oh, okay.
Now, when looking at something like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's... Well, it's entertaining as a tragedy to the audience. They experience the tragedy vicariously.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's also a cautionary tale. Don't allow yourself to be full of hubris. Don't try and understand things that are well beyond your ability to understand. Don't allow your intelligence to go to your head. Video games
Mm-hmm.
can help people do that in a similar way, mostly due to the interactivity. It's the effect of a game on a person is increased by the interactivity. When I play a video game, I'm experiencing the successes, the failures, the tragedies of the characters
Yes.
in a way that you just don't when you're passively watching the experience. It makes the whole thing more affecting.
And the result of the gamer's experience or the gameplay, basically, you're saying takes them along like a tale of some hero in some world, or
Sort of. I mean,
Yeah.
all games
Yeah.
have heroes
okay.
in them. It's, even if you're playing, the darkest, most anti-heroic villain protagonist in history, it's still,
Mm-hmm.
you're still going through stories of fighting evil, it's still,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah.
internal mythology, but the way it affects the players, in way, you can learn a bit about yourself through experience in these stories. In fact, going into that essay on the hero with 1,000 faces that we need to reference,
Yeah.
they talk about how the mythology is actually important. It's built into your psychology to think about this stuff, to give you a sense of your place in the universe and how everything is structured. It's a way of rationalizing the world around you. When you see that in games, they help you to do that. For instance, Telltale's The Walking Dead
Mm-hmm.
is an adventure game based around the player as the character Lee trying to survive in a zombie apocalypse while looking after a young girl named Clementine. The decisions you make in that game, well, they tell you about yourself, what kind of person you are.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to let someone die because, well, they haven't been particularly nice to you? Are you going to prioritize trying to make sure the children are okay? Like, when your group is running low on food, so much so that at least half of them are going to go hungry, who are you going to feed? Are you going to make sure the people that are leading and fighting the zombies, or leading your group and fighting the zombies, Are you going to make sure they're well fed and people
Mm-hmm.
that aren't contributing as much don't get as much to eat? Or are you going to make sure the children eat first, that they can grow up strong and, let the adults bear with it?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, almost. Yeah, almost kind of like this sinking ship idea of like the women and children first kind of thing, kind of approach maybe, or I don't know.
Well, yeah, but without the
Yeah.
cavalierness of that.
Oh, okay, yeah. And then yeah, I was gonna say, but with The Walking Dead, basically they have to make moral choices.
Well, yeah, similar to what you might see in mythology where, well, for example, in the story of Pelops,
Mhm.
at one point where to overthrow a tyrannical king, he bribes one of the king's servants to sabotage the king's chariot so the king will die. And instead of fulfilling his end of the bargain afterwards,
Mhm.
he has the servant killed because it's easier. It also means that no one can talk about it. Well, you come up with things like that in The Walking Dead. For example, in the first episode, there's a character you meet who is, well, he's a racist. To put it lightly, he's a very mean-spirited person. He advises that they kill a kid at one point because the kid was attacked by zombies, and while not bitten and not noticeably infected, he doesn't want to take the risk. Well, you can actually, later in the game, help kill him, or you're given the choice of helping to kill him or helping to save him.
Okay.
And it comes down to, what do you want to do as a person? I mean, do you want to prove that, no, you weren't his enemy, that you're better than this, that you are a person? Or are you going to take revenge for all the slights? Are you going to put him down because, hey, he is a danger to the group? At one point he left you to get killed by zombies, though you got saved by another one of your friends. Yeah, what are you going to do? And that tells you something. You also see in the game how other people are reacting, and how even people that do things that are incredibly horrible seem almost justified in this mad, insane world. Like, there's a group of dairy farmers who have resorted to, when they find someone who's near death, they'll euthanize the person and cannibalize them. Because they don't have any food and they need a way to survive. They actually, it's horrifying, but at the same time, they come across as sympathetic. They aren't evil people. They wouldn't be doing this in normal circumstances, and they certainly don't want to be doing it. What they essentially view it as is, the person's dying, well, fine, we'll use what's left, the needs of the many over the needs of the few. It's actually similar to real-life survival when you have large groups of people who are trapped in a mountainous wilderness, similar to what happened in the story Alive about the South American rugby team. When you're really pushed to the limit, what are you going to do? Sometimes hunger makes you question your baser instincts. And the video game The Walking Dead actually does make you question that. While at the same time it's horrifying, they're antagonists. When you confront them, for example, one of the characters is like, okay, you can kill me, come on. Kill me, make sure the brain's destroyed so I don't turn, and then, eat me to make sure you and your group can survive then. And you're given the choice of, well, are you going to kill him, or you don't eat him, but are you going to kill him, or are you going to leave him alive and walk away?
Walk away, yeah.
And I think that when you examine what you do, when you look at what you've done in the context and think about it, it will tell you just as much, if not more, about yourself than it would when you think about classical heroes like Pelops, like Heracles, like Theseus, like Perseus, people who have done things, some things that are incredibly morally questionable, some things that are incredibly horrible, but at the same time, you wonder, could I have done anything differently? It provides for introspection, is what I'm saying.
And then also, I mean, if you bring it into another game that you're familiar with, that Metal Gear Solid Snake.
Oh yes, Metal
Yeah.
Gear Solid, the main
So,
character
yeah.
Solid Snake, it feels a lot like a Greek
Oh, okay.
tragedy focused around the character of Solid Snake. We see, similar to Greek mythology, we see the backstory behind his birth. We see elements of what could also be considered a divine parentage in that we know he has one parent.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know who the other is, though that is eventually revealed later on in the stories. And we see it all the way up from the beginning of his life to his eventual age and death. And
Mm-hmm.
it fulfills a similar purpose to the Greek tragedies that it's, well, I think inadvertently based on. I'm not sure if Hideo Kojima, the series creator, was intending to create that. We see the story of Solid Snake, and we see his worldview. We see what he believes in, what he grows to believe in when he overcomes his innately violent nature. And it becomes something, it makes you question yourself. Can I look at this and can I overcome my own failings? Can I overcome any violence that I see inside me? Can I better myself as a person? Will I be able to make my own decisions and not ones that are simply shaped for me by society, by my upbringing, by what people more powerful than me want? Can I have my own life? This really, I think, is an aspect of the series that ties into mythology, like what I was saying earlier about how they help you to rationalize who you are, what your wider place in the universe is.
Mm-hmm.
The series helps in a similar way. When you see characters struggle against titanic odds, you're like, can they do this?
Mm-hmm. That's
And
right.
some can and some can't. It happens. And it's really affecting. At that point, you can see something that you could almost model your life after. Well, not in the literal sense, but in I believe this person was actually a pillar of moral character. What would they have done in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I can agree with most of their decisions. I think that if I act similar to them, I can be a good person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's actually a character in that series by the name of Raiden, who, starting out, he just wants to be like Solid Snake. He wants to be the action hero. He wants to be the legendary mercenary that everyone's going to follow. And he's meant as an audience insert character. We're meant to look at him and see ourselves. And moving on from the game he appears in, Sons of Liberty, to Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots, Raiden has been almost completely broken by the events of the game. He's been, the series. He's been manipulated, he's been betrayed, he's come to question the nature of his own existence, like, is there a point of this? Is there a point to me continuing on? And we see, no, he has a life ahead of him. He still has people that care about him. He's grown up to be a father. He'll be raising new lives into the world and passing on his own experiences, his own memes.
Mm-hmm.
And really, it's both heartwarming and something that you can see as a reason to hope as a person. No matter what happens, you can move on. You can eventually grow past it, and it will make you stronger. At the same time, it'll make the people who come after you stronger as you pass the experiences on and create your own mythology, your own story, based around the experiences of your own life. The characters in Walking Dead and in Metal Gear Solid, even when they do villainous things, and even when they're antagonists, they don't necessarily seem evil for it. In fact, some people, they seem like they're doing the best they can in their circumstances. In Walking Dead, for example, the racist I mentioned earlier is named Larry. He and his daughter Lily are part of your group, and Lily is also an adult. Larry wants to preserve the safety of the group. He wants to make sure his daughter is safe. He wants to make sure Clementine's safe. I mentioned that he's a racist. and he is, but he also doesn't like Lee because he knows that Lee, before the events of the game, was convicted of murder. For context, it was the murder of a state senator who was sleeping with Lee's wife. In that instance, Larry, while still being a horrible person to be around, he's a very angry person, and he's very antagonistic to the people around him. You see him in a better light, and he becomes rather sympathetic, and you wonder, is he really a villain, or is he actually not that bad of a person? Certainly from Lee's perspective, he's an antagonist, but they want the same thing, and they want to achieve the same thing. It's just that they each view the other as an obstacle to achieving that goal, which is the safety of the group and the safety of Clementine. In Metal Gear Solid, this is brought up even more with characters who do incredibly morally questionable things, incredibly horrible things. At one point in Metal Gear Solid 2, you find out that the villain's plan, the central antagonist's plan, is to deploy nuclear weapons in New York City, and it's going to kill millions of people, and it's horrible. But when you see the greater context around that, you see he himself is fighting against a larger, shadowy organization that is in control of the United States. And what he's doing is rebelling against them and trying to create a world, starting in the New York City that he's going to nuke, that will fight against them and restore freedom and the ideals that the United States was founded on.
Almost like an Illuminati and like a Deus Ex.
Yeah,
Okay.
Similar to the Illuminati in Deus Ex.
Yeah.
The reasoning why he needs to nuke the city is because the group known as the Patriots has, through the use of the internet, effective, not so much control, but they're able to monitor and they're able to respond and control information, which he's trying to stop. And you wonder, you look at it and you think, that's horrible, but at the same time, is there really any better option in that instance? Is he really a villain, or is he a hero that's doing what needs to be done? An unscrupulous hero, but still a hero. And that's the kind of thing that leads to, again, self-introspection. You wonder, could I do this? I mean, I can understand why he's being a villain. Could I do the same thing in similar circumstances? Are you willing to do something that seems evil if you think the ends will justify the means? These are important questions that I think a person needs to ask themselves, that they need to be able to understand to really get who they are as a person. And this is one of the things that mythologies help do. They help you see these circumstances, and it's one of the things that video games have improved on in the modern time period. You get to see, when push comes to shove, am I going to do something that I might have earlier and might still later think is horrible, and given the circumstances, would I have done anything different? Especially knowing the results. You especially see this in games like Spec Ops The Line, where the focus is on a Delta team of the U.S. military that's been sent in to a sandstorm-ravaged Dubai after a U.S. military colonel entered the city with a battalion of troops to try and restore order and provide relief support. While you're in the city, you do a number of horrible things. You commit war crimes in that city.
Exactly.
Stuff that ends up completely breaking the members of the team, that pushes the player character over the edge.
Very unethical decisions throughout the gameplay, really, amongst the characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you look, and it's done by the player similar to how in Call of Duty you might take control of a Predator drone and wipe out large chunks of enemies. You're like, yeah! In Spec Ops The Line, you do that and you realize, holy shit, this is horrifying. Like, the way these people are going to suffer from the effects of white phosphorus, and the way it doesn't distinguish between people who are armed combatants and people who are just nearby and are just trying to escape.
Exactly, yeah.
And you see the effects of collateral damage, the deaths of civilians, and it leads you to the question, why are you enjoying this? Why, as a person, would you want to take part in this? And going on later, when you're desperate to survive, when your squad's in danger, and one of them looks like he's about to be killed, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to try and save him? I mean, that involves firing into a crowd of unarmed civilians. That is a war crime.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What are you going to do? Are you going to unload into a crowd of civilians? Are you going to try and get them to disperse? That's actually one of the game's most chilling moments, and it allows you to see a part of yourself. It allows you to see who you are in the dark in a way that nothing else can. And that you could learn about yourself that way, that you could help understand yourself that way, is something that mythology has not been able to do up to this point. It's only been able to do that vicarious. Here, though, you can see how it affects you, but at the same time, you're given the gift of a second chance. It hasn't actually happened, and it means if you genuinely are horrified by it, you can walk away from the experience having learned more about yourself and knowing, I can try and improve myself after this. I can better myself after this.
Yes.
I can recognize situations now, and I can rise above what I would have done otherwise.
All right. Well, that, I guess, sounds to me to be quite a bit of topics covered, Austin, in the mythology.
Yes, we seem to have summed it up fairly well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's Austin and Dan signing off.
All right, everyone.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.